It's my favorite thing when a podcast starts with a good laugh. So,
Always good.
always good. Welcome to this week's episode of Transforming 45. Uh, this week, I'm so excited to have Andrea Austin on the episode. And I also just want to take a few minutes to say thank you to the listeners. So we are very quickly creeping up to 1,000 listens, which is really, really exciting. So, for those of you who are out there listening and letting me know what the episodes mean to you and how you resonate with them, it's the whole reason for doing this podcast, is knowing that it's connecting with people. So, I'm so grateful to you. And if you are listening and it means something to you and you can share with someone, I would so appreciate it, because I would love to be able to get to 1,000 listens by like middle of May. My birthday's May the 8th. So it would be an amazing birthday present. So maybe we can put that challenge out there to the universe and to everyone who's listening, because women's voices and stories matter. And the more we share those stories and the varied and beautiful voices of all of the women who are being so open and transparent on the show, the more we make space for people to be seen and heard and understood. So it's not really, it's about the number, but it's not. It's about having people hear and see themselves. So you can now hear us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, on YouTube, and I am actively working to get on all the other podcast platforms as well. So some exciting updates coming. So for this week's episode, Andrea, we happened to meet at the Awakening Energy event that would happen in Collingwood in March, and our booths were side by side. And almost immediately, I felt a really lovely connection with you and your partner and the work that you were doing. So, Andrea is the co-founder of My Conscious Wellness and the Love Evolution. So, I'd love for you to tell us about the work of My Conscious Wellness and the Love Evolution.
That's a loaded question, but I'll do my best to simplify that. So given my background is in business, which I figure this story will fit right into transforming 45. It's hard for me to make sense to how did I end up, in the standard corporate world into Love Evolution and My Conscious Wellness. To simplify it, I think there's always been an inner knowing, an intuitive sense, whatever that is, that the world is founded in love. But I was kind of always felt like this kid looking around going, well, it's not there, and it's not there, and it's not there. And what I've come to recognize is really that the journey for myself was finding the love within myself and then building the foundation from there. So everything about My Conscious Wellness and Love Evolution, the two different platforms. My Conscious Wellness is the joint partnership of a community focusing on using sound-based vibrational tools to help us strengthen our connection to our inner knowing, our intuitive side.
Mm-hmm.
And then Love Evolution is more of my own creation play space, because I'm in the process of finishing or completing a PhD in metaphysics. And so what I'm trying in this space is to get people to understand we are love, we are vibration, we are this connection to something bigger than just this human side. And so the Love Experiment is, interestingly, my podcast, but also my written space to express what I feel and have learned over my life. So those are the two organizations and why they're here.
Okay. That's really fascinating. And I now have 1,000 questions for you
Let him rip.
around metaphysics. But first, I want you to, so you alluded to some of your story at the beginning, because when you are doing heart-led and heart-centered work, it's not just the work. It's part of you. It's your identity, and it is an encapsulation in many ways of your story. So tell me your story. What brought you to this work?
Oh my. Let me see if I can simplify it. I think very much like I alluded to at the beginning, I felt like most of my life I was searching for something outside of myself. So I would look within an organization to belong or to make a difference or to teach or learn from others. And it took many forms. I'm a former tax accountant. I taught accountants taxation across this country at the University of Toronto. And then I taught kids how to swim when I was younger because I love water. And then I had this whole passion for business, right? And learning about the nonprofit industry and how we helped each other. And it always had this loving and helping others flavor, which I
Mm-hmm.
find typical with a lot of women in particular. But then I tried to play like the, sorry, I shouldn't laugh, the high corporate big business, put on my $500 suit role, right, to see
Mm-hmm.
if I could fit into that reality. And on so many levels, I didn't. And for me, transparently, it actually made me pretty sick.
Mm-hmm.
Um, on the outside, I may have looked like I had my shit together, as one might say, and then other people, if they knew me, knew that I was really struggling on the inside.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, the transformational wake up call was in my 40s.
Mm-hmm.
I was in the ideal, perfect location after one of the biggest projects I'd ever finished in my career, and so tired I could barely get out of bed. And my language would be my soul
Mm-hmm.
hovered above my body in the Turks and Caicos. And I was like I was on the ceiling fan looking down at myself. And I yelled, "Are you happy?"
Mm-hmm.
And that had been coming up a lot in my life. And it brought up a lot of anger and a lot of fear because I had built the life that I thought I should build to make myself happy, right? So the dog, the house, the cottage, the husband, the two children, the paradox and the paradigm that my mental reality had told me, or my external, doesn't matter, created. And so I did that. And so, in the eyes of many people, I was extremely successful and still am today. But genuinely, there wasn't a happiness within myself. And so that was the kicker in my 40s. I'm not surprised if lots of women and people are going through that at the same time. But what I've come to realize within my journey of the last 11 years now, because I'm turning 55 in May,
Mm-hmm.
um, was that really what I lost for me was the journey of following the inner knowing of what I felt inside of me.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was constantly listening to the patterning that I'd been taught as a child or had to be as the role as a parent and or what society I felt the role should be as a teacher, mother, brother, all those things, right? And realizing in hindsight that is the false illusion.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't mean that we're not those things anymore. It's just what's driving our decisions. And so as I journeyed with my conscious wellness and some of the technological sound solutions, what I realized is like as I could depattern
Mm-hmm.
my belief system, I could then grow a more nurturing belief system that was in alignment with myself. And that's where I believe true happiness resides within all of us. And so that's the short story. I mean, there's lots of beautiful, interesting complexities,
Mm-hmm.
but that's the inner knowing, I think, that I've come more deeply within myself to understand.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not an accident, right? That women in particular, humans of all form, start to find themselves at a certain age. Some do it younger, some do it at all different phases. But there does seem to be a particular awakening that is happening right now, and that happens for women in their 40s. And I have some ideas about why that starts to happen, and I'm interested to hear what your take on that is.
Oh, wow. Um, I can only share my personal, right,
Mm-hmm.
perspective. is I think, somebody last week, maybe this is a good way to sum it up. The source of all anger is that we're not actually listening to ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And we try to fit into all the other things we think we should be.
Mm-hmm.
And so my mom used to say to me, I don't get it. I don't know why you're angry all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I think on some level, I had that inner knowing that I wasn't listening and following what I truly felt inside. And so my language is there becomes a misalignment in our lives, in our energies, or however you want to describe that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the more we get misaligned, the more uncomfortable it becomes.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the discomfort that's the indicator to get back on course to what our lives want to be.
Mm-hmm.
And, if I look at my life, I could actually never see past the age of 35, which is intriguing unto itself. I had made the perfect plan that all came into manifestation by the time I was 35. And then when I woke up, I wasn't happy. And I thought, what the,
You can swear
and
here.
so, okay, I wasn't sure. Everybody's podcast's a little different, but I felt like, what the fuck, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so maybe 40 is a common age for women or people in particular. I find men generally a little bit later, but the same thing kind of occurs
Mm-hmm.
where you kind of go, wait a second, I fit the paradigm and the paradox I thought I should be. And I'm waking up and I'm like, I'm not happy. And so we have a couple choice points, right? We can continue to get old and grouchy, which is an option. I
Mm-hmm.
call it option B.
Mm-hmm.
But option A is to actually start to question what we've been taught, what we've been shown, and what we're listening to. Now, this isn't true for everybody,
Mm-hmm.
but it is true for a good, percentage of the population, to be clear.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting where we come into that realizationing and awakening within ourselves to begin to question our very existence.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I want to go back to where you said I'd written the story up until I was about 35 years old. And that is my experience as well. And the more humans I talk to, or, the more you start telling your story, other people will also start to come forward and say, yeah, yeah, me too. Right. So we envision, manifest our lives up until what we have been programmed to do, right? Young family, career, relationships, however those look. But that's the picture. And then you get there. And then that is the question. Well, what the fuck is next? If I've done all of this and now I'm only feeling like I'm coming into myself now at this point, but I have written the story that I thought was going to be the story. And I talk about this a lot on the podcast, but the myth of the happy ending. Right?
Oh, yeah.
And how harmful that stupid myth is, right? That you fight, you have all of these struggles and building your life, and then you get your happy ending. But that is not life. That is not reality. We continue to live our cycle. And that is the challenge of this incarnation, and it is the joy. Right? I think I talked about this on maybe my first episode, but I always wanted to know the ending of every book that I read. And if it got to a part where it was getting to be too stressful and I was like, oh God, I don't know how this is going to turn out, I would go and I would read the end. So that I could give myself like space to breathe and know like, okay, I just have to get through this part and then it's going to be fine. And I have watched that pattern.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. I have watched that pattern play out in my own life. And I have a hypothesis that a lot of people are also in that cycle.
Oh my God, that's magical. Like totally magical.
Yeah.
Because Bill and I, my partner and I, were having this conversation this morning, right? He's in the process of creating something he never imagined. So it's Freudianly fun, right? That he would actually be doing in this life. but I keep getting and reminding him to enjoy the experience.
Mm-hmm.
And so, what I've come to realize, very much like you just said, is there's some deep programming
Mm-hmm.
around happily ever after. God, look at Disney alone.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep.
Happily ever after instead of actually enjoying the highs and the lows of the ride.
Mm-hmm.
So we have some very strong subconscious belief systems about the way life should be that are continually playing out. And when we're not in that, it causes extreme tension, apprehension
Mm-hmm.
within ourselves. And so if we could actually let go,
Mm-hmm.
then everything would be a success. And I'm sure there'll be people punching me right now as they listen to this, but I get it, right? That we could actually succeed just by living.
Yes.
And it doesn't mean it doesn't have, trials and tribulations, but it's the lens and the perspective that we're seeing through. So, like a really good example of that is I was bred literally to believe the house, the dog, and the cottage would make me happy.
Mm-hmm.
My interim solution, I negotiated with the universe, I call it, when I made a big step was to move from that into a bridge solution. Then I went to a renting solution because real estate for me was, the safety net.
Mm-hmm.
Then we moved to nothing. Like we literally went nomadic for a while. And what's interesting is, the universe has brought us this adorable little place on a river. I didn't imagine this. I didn't try to create it. It just happened.
Mm-hmm.
Because what's happening is, like you said, I'm not creating from that belief system as much. I'm not the Virgin Mary anymore. Because I'm just allowing life to occur. And when you've been brought up in the belief systems of success and control, right, which I was very indoctrinated in, and then allowing to surrender and let life flow and bring you that happiness,
Mm-hmm.
it's a very different paradox. Wow, that's super interesting observation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Thank you.
And listening to what you were saying, it makes me think about how we separate ourselves from who we truly are, right? So we move from the internal to the external, and we start to define ourselves by the roles that we play.
Yes.
And that's where the danger really lies, is when we begin to think that that role is who I am.
Yeah.
Right. So there are all kinds of roles that I play in my life. I'm a daughter, I am an educator, I am a mother. And for quite some time, I identified as those roles.
Yep.
And it was when similarly I started thinking like I have all of these things that I wanted, and yet I cry to and from work in the car every day. What's that about? And coming to realize that I had taken my whole self and externalized it, where I had to find my worth and my value in everything that was external to myself.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we realize that we have made that schism where we've we've like,
Good word.
yeah, we've literally cut ourselves off from the truth of who we are, and then we have to go on this journey to find out who we are, because we abandoned that and let it go in place of these roles.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. I mean, the role that you said all the way through that has been hard for me to receive over the years, given the life that I chose, is to just accept that I am, period.
Mm-hmm.
Like I am worthy, period. I don't need to perform. I don't need to do anything. And the vision I got, you'll laugh, is I used to show up in the perfect role. I had the
Mm-hmm.
perfect striped, blonde hair with the perfect suit, and I couldn't cry because I was on the GO train, so it was a lot harder.
Yeah.
But I was dying
Mm-hmm.
inside and didn't realize that that was manifesting in my physical reality.
Mm-hmm.
And so a number of years ago, when I started to realize that most physical ailments, not all, but many, are caused by the manifestation of the misalignment of truth within ourselves,
Mm-hmm.
I went, oh God, that makes sense to me, because I wasn't listening,
Mm-hmm.
right? I was filling the role. And it doesn't mean I'm not a mother. I mean, heck, they're adorably 20 and 17 in the moment, but I'm not the mother. And my partner used to joke, the hardest transition I made was motherhood.
Mm-hmm.
When my kids would be around, it would like I'd be go back to being a robot,
Mm-hmm.
because that was the hardest one for me to let go of, and still is at times, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it is the roles, the way you're defining that we've externally filtered ourselves into, that I feel is providing the dissatisfaction inside ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, well said. Thank you.
Thank you. And yeah, the tension, that word that you used, tension, I think is really key, because when we really do tune in, we start to feel where that tension resides in our bodies, right? Which again connects to that the metaphysical component of, when you start to listen and when you start to go inward, you do feel it in your physical body. And there's so much tension around the role of mother. And that is why it's such a difficult transition, right? There's
Yep.
1 minute you were one person, and in literally a heartbeat, you have a whole new identity.
Yep.
And the story is that you should just be able to do that flawlessly.
Yes, I know. I have a gorgeous redheaded sister that's going through a similar transition right now.
Yeah.
Very much defined herself as motherhood in a very beautiful way.
Mm-hmm.
But both kids are gone, and she's looking around going, oh,
Yeah.
like, who am I?
Mm-hmm.
Right. And it would be easy to fall back into that pattern by next waiting to become the grandmother or the grandfather or the aunt or the uncle,
Mm-hmm.
instead of trying to find ourselves.
Yeah. And what is so fascinating is that when we start living our lives for other people, so we become other people because of the defined role that we now find ourselves in and the story that has been written about that role, it turns out we actually do a disservice to the people who are around us.
Apparently, I haven't noticed. Alrighty.
Yeah. But
Yeah.
it is so deeply ingrained in us to give yourself over to
Yep.
the young humans that you've created and your partner, and to just, you are now no longer your own identity. You are this family, you're this role. And we are taught to hide our actual selves from our children.
Yep.
What's interesting, though, is that when you start to show who you truly are to your kids, they already know. Like, they have seen through, because kids are like that for the most part. Like, they know the truth. They are the truth. They were born the truth. And when you start to show them, it's what humanizes the relationship. It's what
Yes.
allows you to be able to have real, true connection, because they don't just see you as this thing. They see you as a human, just as I see them as a human, not as something that belongs to me.
Yep.
Yeah.
No, 100%. I think when my little humans were born, even at the age of 3, I knew I couldn't be a traditional parental role. Not that I had any idea what to do with that, in all transparency.
Mm.
And trust me, I tried. But in hindsight, now that they're older, because I'm willing to share from my own sense of curiosity without judgment, getting to know who they are without trying to make them into what I believe
Mm-hmm.
they should be, although I catch myself at times. Um, there's a deepening in the relationship, right, with myself and with them. And what I heard as you said that is, we don't realize that that's actually what gives our children permission to also be themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, they I believe what I'm witnessing is continue to observe our behavior. And so when they become parents, they don't know how to do it either. And they're replicating the role
Mm-hmm.
of what they think they should be as parents, rather than that true human to human, soul to soul connection of love or imperfection, or my language might be unconditional love,
Mm-hmm.
um, to grow and create within themselves. So they repeat the pattern of the external creation, right, of what I think, or somebody else they should think should be, and rather than tuning in to internally discovering and exploring what that is within themselves. I mean, you make me think of a question my oldest son said to me. I laughed. Mom, how do I know if I've chosen the right path? And I said, you'll never have a clue.
Mm-hmm.
First off, there's no right and wrong, sweetheart. It's all just a journey and a ride. And second, you've got to just trust your gut instinct. Your gut told you that this is where you need to be and this is what you want to do. You got to trust that, but you also have to give yourself permission to get off that
Mm-hmm.
if it ever feels incorrect, because we also create that paradox too, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's deepened my relationship with my children in their later years that I can see lasting a lifetime, because I've been willing to do my own, some might say work, but my own reframing, right,
Mm-hmm.
of who I am, and then giving them by osmosis permission to do the same.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because when you set yourself free, you set everybody else around you free as well.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, very good. Yeah, great analogy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it's not, and because of our human history, it's not an easy thing to do.
Well, there might be, just might be, a little bit of enslavement energy that exists all across the planet. So we give ourselves permission, right,
Yes.
to have, like, I try to make fun of it now. We'll see how I do, right? I don't want to make it all that serious anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I'm trying to just recognize the intergenerational patterns, right, within our families, within our society, and go, oh, did you like that? And have
Mm-hmm.
fun with saying, okay, maybe I might want to let that go and change that for myself and my family. So this isn't about mass world change, but
Mm-hmm.
it might start, with ourselves, which is the definition to me of awakening,
Mm-hmm.
is starting to be actually willing to see this world differently
Mm-hmm.
through the eyes of love.
Mm-hmm. And the eyes of fun. It's interesting. This has been a little bit of a theme of conversation that's been happening in my week. And that is, it's supposed to be fun, right? It's not always, because things are cyclical,
I get it.
and it's not supposed to be that serious. It's supposed to be fun and joyful. And some of the work is getting to that.
Yeah, I think joyful for me still sometimes can be a stretch, because I
Mhm.
was a pretty serious cat.
Mhm.
But what I do see is, if we continue to focus on it being serious and dramatic and traumatic and
Mhm.
all those things, which I'm not debating, some of it has been downright shitty. Okay.
Absolutely.
Then I'm just questioning whether we're perpetuating more of the same.
Mhm.
So it's just learning to take it lighter, more fun, maybe play with it and make fun of it, like whatever that is for whoever's listening, right?
Mhm.
Um, but the drama and the trauma story, like, if you could watch Netflix
Yeah.
and realize that that's the story that's still being played out in mainstream media, in our television services, and we don't realize that that perpetuates the pattern within the subconscious mind.
Mhm.
Now, don't get me wrong, I love a good Netflix show, so I'm not going to throw stones,
Yeah.
but that's not what I mean. It's just becoming aware that we're actually continuing to perpetuate that.
Mhm.
Because I've watched, like, I used to love to go from the high to the low, to the high to the low. And I wonder how much I prided myself on that.
Mhm.
And instead of seeing it like a comedic act, right? If you can watch Shameless and find it funny, then you know you've evolved, right?
Right.
Because the world is a big stage play. And I'm wondering how much role each of us choose to play in that.
Yeah, it does shift your perspective. when you start thinking through that lens of role. And like that kind of brings us back to that conversation again around, yeah, what role am I playing? And it's not to deny what has happened in the past.
No.
No. Yeah, it like we recognize that that happened. Trauma has happened to us, to generations who came before us.
Yes.
And what is our what is our capability now of changing the story? Right?
Yes.
Yes.
Changing the story, baby.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because when you see yourself as the author of your own life, then you get to write the story if you're the author.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And when you write the story, what comes to mind though is when we still write the story and we're trying to control other people in our story,
Yeah.
then we're not writing the story, folks. That's like trying to get the happy ending.
Mm-hmm.
So we write our story and then expect the people around us, right, to perform
Mm-hmm.
in a certain way because they're not fitting into my story. Then we have a problem, which is probably how most wars have been started. So
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think that's a really important distinction and point to make though, because oh God, do we ever want to control like the characters around us, right? We want to be the
yeah,
main character and we want to make the decisions for everybody else so that the main character gets their happy ending, right? And
my prima donna comes out.
exactly. And like it would be so much easier were that the case, but then we have all of these competing authors because everybody's trying to write their own story, and that's where friction happens, right? Or
Yes.
comparison or um actually I had a little rant this morning because in my workout the trainer was trying to do some mindset work, and the mindset this trainer was creating was that to be excellent you have to work harder than everyone else. You have
Even that.
yeah,
Yep.
you have to perform more. You have to be more. You have to and it was this constant ranking. And I found
Mm.
myself just yelling, "Stop it. Stop it. Stop telling that story."
Yep.
Because as long as we continue to set that up that I only exist in relation and comparison to someone else, that only continues to build that narrative of competition, of
Yep.
I only and exactly that, I only exist because somebody else is better or worse than me and I'm comparing myself on either side.
Yep.
And that is the envy cycle, right? That is actually the story that creates separation between
Correct.
humans rather than turning inward, knowing, like you said earlier, I have value because I exist. Full stop.
Full stop.
And when we can get to that point, then I don't have to feel envious of the person beside me. I don't feel like I have to be better than them. What I want is for all of us to come to rise up together.
100%. And the only slight tweak
Mm-hmm.
is I think our own responsibility is to rise up within ourselves.
Yeah. Yes.
There's a trick. I'm not sure yet. Let me know, Lisa, later if I was wrong. That the egoic mind wants to play, that still has an expectation that if I rise up within myself, that I must take others along
Mm.
the rise up as well. And so this is a questioning, no
Mm-hmm.
idea, okay, within myself, is that also offers what might call a false level of illusion or a false level of struggle or a false level of consciousness that it's our job to do it anywhere else except within ourselves. And
Uh-huh.
then within that, there's a natural, let's say, curiosity or role that each of us can play that then by osmosis will impact other people.
Uh-huh.
But there's been a questioning within me lately, even deeper. Do we even have to take anybody else along for the ride? So that's just one of the things that kind of hit me when you said that.
Uh-huh. And I deeply feel that when you ask that question.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. Because we are,
Yeah.
if we're working toward our own internal sovereignty,
Correct.
right, then we need to do that to be ourselves and let everybody else around us be themselves and get to their own story, go where they are going, whether it's
Yes.
where we think everybody should be going or not.
It's kind of like the stage. My partner used to have the best analogy. I wanted to punch him when he told me this story. So you could tell the struggle with him. He's like, so if you look at life like a stage and you get on the stage and you play your role, but then you get on the stage and you start to interfere with another actor's role. The conductor or the
Mhm.
director comes in and goes, cut. Now listen, Andrea, your role is not Bob's role. Your role is your own. You have no right to go in and interfere with Bob's role on the stage. So let's try this again. And this is where we really, I have observed, feel that we have the right, even myself, to interfere
Yeah.
in other people's roles, instead of focusing on our own. Doesn't mean we don't share and connect and provide opportunities to reflect, but it isn't our job to project our realities onto other people. We must learn within ourselves.
Mhm.
And this to me is true human evolution, giving each other permission to learn inside of ourselves.
Mhm. Yeah. You've got me thinking about a lot of things.
Sorry,
And
it's a
that
thing.
no, it's the best thing. It's why these conversations are so important because you live from your own lens and your own experience, and it's only through
Yes.
conversation that you get to hear another perspective. And when you were talking, what I was thinking was this, well, fuck, and doesn't that just free us up? If we're not constantly trying to heal everyone else when you really start to examine that as well, if I feel like I have to heal someone else, I am writing what I think they need to have healed,
100%.
which probably has nothing to do with them and still has everything to do with me.
Yep.
Yeah. It's why in my coaching work, I don't write a curriculum. I don't write a program,
Right.
right? Because that would be about me. I would
Correct.
be laying my healing journey on the people that I am supporting on their own healing journey. And that's not it. That's not it. It has to be about you. And yeah, and freedom. Doesn't that just free us up when we're not trying to create a story for everyone else around us?
Yeah, and the only reason I can share this is because I lived it, right?
Mhm.
So my sense is that's almost what killed me.
Yeah.
Is I spent a lot of time, well, we can say fuck, we can say this,
Mhm.
masturbating in other people's realities. That's
Mm. Mhm.
something a girlfriend gave me once, and it really rung true.
Yeah.
Is I spend a lot of time in the should of every other reality except my own.
Yeah.
And so it was like giving leaky gut, giving away my energy. And so the freedom comes when you reclaim that energetic homeostasis. Sometimes it swings
Mhm.
right on a pendulum from under giving to over giving,
Yep.
right? That's just the journey, right? But then coming fully into alignment within ourselves, and learning what that feels like and what that acts like and what that actually translates into our worlds, because it does provide a very different lens. We do not realize how much we're seeing the world through our own lens.
Mm-hmm. And that, in so many ways, really starts to lay the groundwork for the fear culture that we're living in right now, in so many ways.
In what way?
In that,
Elaborate.
like, when you are constantly trying to look outside of yourself, if something looks different from what you think it should be, then that triggers a fear in you, and you feel like that's something that you have to fix, or that it's wrong, or that it needs to be the way that you think it should be. And we see that playing out in such intense ways in our world right now.
Well, that's the beauty and the magic,
Hmm.
right? Also, though, of a duality
Yes.
consciousness, is that's the way the world's been set. And it brings to mind an analogy years ago that came to me. It was like the three little pigs.
Hmm.
And it really hit home. So we build our house, our foundation, on the external reality around us.
Hmm.
And so every time there's a shift in the world, or in a family situation, or in a partnership situation, our world within ourselves crumbles because we've placed it with hooks in
Hmm.
others, right?
Hmm.
So if we can create that strong foundation, which many of us have been taught that's selfish to do,
Hmm.
within ourselves, then when the world shifts and the next catastrophe happens, or
Hmm.
the next whatever, we're not rocked within ourselves. It doesn't mean we're ignoring
Hmm.
it, but we're vibrationally not, convulsing after we see the next world event, because we can see a strength or come from a strength within ourselves. And most of the biggest teachings in metaphysics and spirituality, however you want to frame that, really are coming from that inner foundation of
Hmm.
love
Yeah.
within ourselves, and then rippling out what we wish to do and create in the world. Otherwise, we're creating on a faulty foundation.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. That is key. And I'm going to say it, I'm going to repeat it because I really want people to hear that, right? You're creating from a faulty foundation if you're not coming from a place of deeply loving self.
Yeah.
Yeah. And being deeply
Yeah.
connected and caring in real ways for this
Yeah.
self. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you kind of brought it around to that with I'm fascinated to know about what you were studying in your PhD in metaphysics.
Oh, that's fun.
Yeah.
So the core foundational piece is unconditional love. So, which means to me love within myself. And then how do you love in this world that seems so not based in love? And the PhD part is very much a little bit like what we just said about highlighting some of the patterns and stories that have been playing out within humanity, to try to reverse the victim, let's call it, perception, or the poor me perception, or the egoic need to control,
Hmm.
because I've lived that too, the opposite of trying to control everything, because feel we need to dominate, instead of just getting to understand that when we can let go, in however you do it, right, of those patterns of fear, scarcity, lack, and loss within oneself, that becomes the precipice and the tipping point at which we can actually facilitate systemic change first within ourselves.
Hmm.
And so there's certain tools that we're working with right now that we're actually going to do a bit of a study. I don't care what tool you use, to actually show what can happen when we hit that tipping point within change within ourselves. So I didn't always realize that I was living a story. Okay. Right. Like, I didn't realize that I was living a pattern. I've had a lot of experiences, deep awarenesses, to make me realize this. And some call this the study of consciousness, or the study of love, or metaphysics, however you phrase that. But my sense is that I really wish to simplify this and make it light and fun by using my own examples. So we'll
Mhm.
have some fun with that, right? To get people to just realize that's what's happening. And if they want change, the job is just to get out of the story. And so that really got me excited, because I spent a lot of my life thinking there was something wrong with me. So that's what's motivated it, right? Like I'm probably the largest self critic likely on the planet. Um, I judged a lot of myself, not realizing I was auto responding to the roles and the responsibilities and the paradoxes and the paradigms. And so I went, oh God, you mean there really is nothing wrong with me? I did spend 9 years with a psychologist trying to piece together, like, I know I'm brilliant. I love my life. I have all these parts. What the fuck is wrong with me? And I realized it was just me undoing all of that and getting back to me and living my own story. And so that's the simplest reason. I mean, that's why it excites me, because I do have this wacky do academic side, but that wants to simplify it
Mhm.
for people. And that's what this PhD is about. It's not to try and get hoity toity or make things complicated, but to actually challenge myself to see if I can simplify this for other people
Mhm.
in my podcasts and my stories, so that they can begin to also see how they can transition from a disempowered state to this freedom state in themselves, to which we're speaking today.
Yeah, that is really powerful work. And I really appreciate the stance of simplification because
Trying.
because it's not that's not easy, right? When you're I mean it is and it isn't.
Yep.
I would imagine.
No, it is and it isn't.
Yeah.
Because we like to, oh, I like to make things complicated too. So
Mhm.
the challenge to myself is to see if I can articulate the simplicity and the not simplicity
Mhm.
in this. And it's interesting because the alignment and the hilarity is I used to teach taxation at the University of Toronto.
Right.
And that's a topic most people avoid at the best times of their lives, even the accountants, right?
Yeah.
And what drove me was the same thing. How could I teach what is actually a very simple topic that's steeped in fear and lack and scarcity? Nobody wants to take on in Canada, be Revenue Canada or the IRS, right? Because they think it's like this false illusion, and it's not. It's just a bunch of rules
Mhm.
that if you could interpret and go, wait a second, that's not so complicated. I think I could actually do that, then everyone would. Well, that's how I feel
Mhm.
about life. We've forgotten the simplicity of our stories and what they're doing to ourselves.
Mhm. Yeah, that's a really important mind frame because especially in the world of academia because as you said, we love to make it so fucking complicated. And in many ways, I am coming to understand that it's a tool of oppression,
Interesting.
right? The more complicated you can make something, the more, just like you said with the tax, like just the word taxation. And I'm like, peace out. Bye. This was fun.
Run.
However, it is that it is creating barriers that tell us that it's harder than it actually is.
Right.
Right, so it creates barriers for people that they think that they can't break through, and that is where the oppression lies. And also, and speaking from my personal experience, because I am a skeptical spiritual person
Good.
because of my academic training. And yes, it serves a purpose because I'm constantly questioning. So I don't just fall into things blindly.
Touchdown.
Yeah. And at the same time, it makes it so much more complicated than it needs to be because I really don't need to question everything all the time.
Well, that's true. This I understand.
Yes. And yet here I am constantly questioning.
Well, there's a beauty in the questioning
Mhm.
if we don't hold on to the story. And that's been the hardest thing, is I think in the academic world, we're taught that we need to know.
Mhm.
I very much prided myself on the need to know and becoming a quote professional. I use that with loose terms
Mm-hmm.
because there is a beauty, right, in really understanding. And I did enjoy it. Like, I'm a nerd at heart. I
Mm-hmm.
will admit that. I found the taxation world extremely interesting. And in hindsight, I can actually understand energetically why it was built. And I will not continue to perpetuate the story that it's a bad thing.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't mean like anything else, it doesn't need love, right? But, every story can be twisted one way or the other. And so taxation is just another story that can be perpetuated as good or bad.
Mm-hmm.
And why do we consistently make it a bad thing?
Mm-hmm.
And so when I shifted from priding myself of the needing to know and constantly needing to find that part of me and then letting go and surrendering and allowing, that's why the metaphysical degree hit me scar. I'm like, I'm not doing that. Like, I've already been through that journey in my life.
Yep.
Why the fuck would I do that again?
Yeah.
But for me, metaphysics is a passion. Even my
Mm-hmm.
partner says, you're the biggest nerd I've ever met in that regard, because there's something inside of me that's truly wanting to explore that. So for me, the need to know or the quest to know, when it's coming from an innate inner, like, ooh, what's that? Like, what's that all about?
Mm-hmm.
That's great. I don't really care in the moment how bananas are grown. I don't need to feed that side of me. And that may be a simple example, but I think we come here to explore what does get us excited. It could be how to grow trees, it could be how to change the climate system. Like, all those things are super cool things. But
Mm-hmm.
when we're doing that from our own inner excitement, like NASA scientists, or how do I pick up garbage, I really don't care
Mm-hmm.
what brings that to you, right?
Mm-hmm.
But listening to that is what I think brings us life,
Mm-hmm.
brings us joy when we get back to that concept.
Mm-hmm.
And it took me a long time, hun, to find that joy within me. So these, PhDs or theses, whatever the hell I'm writing that God knows I never thought I'd be doing, actually give me an orgasm. So I know I'm on the right track,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But it's not because I'm trying to prove anymore. And it took me time to reconcile this. I did a lot of trying to prove
Mm-hmm.
things outside of me. And I'm just continuously tuning in. Am I doing this because I want to do this, not because the world dictates this is what I need to be successful or who I am?
Mm. And isn't that the question?
Yeah,
Right?
there's the best question of
Mhm.
them all, given the question discussion we just had.
Yeah. Yeah. That
Yeah.
is that is the heart of all of the questions. Is this what
Yeah.
I truly want?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when you can listen to that, then life is good.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's to go to simple, go to a bar and have a glass of wine with friends. Like, it doesn't need to be complicated. Back to the complicated story,
Yeah.
right? It's just really listening to what I want. I mean, I remember my son in university saying, "Mom, again, how do I know whether I should be out socializing or out studying?" And I said to him, "Nobody can tell you that.
Mm-hmm.
Your job is to listen to what it is that you want in your life and not let the external environment tell you what that is."
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's it.
That's it. Yeah. So I think that is the perfect place to leave it with that question, right? To sit with, what is it that you truly want
Want.
internally? Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, thank you so much for this. This has been a fascinating conversation. The hour flew by. And all of any links that you have. So for listeners to know, for what's the name of your podcast?
The Love Experiment,
Ooh,
interestingly,
yes.
hosted by Love Evolution. It's on Spotify right now and Apple. Those are the only two places. I just started it
Mm-hmm.
again, really tuning into what do I actually want to create, and still I think I have to.
Mm-hmm.
So you can tune in there too and have some fun.
Yeah. And I will put
Yep.
the links to that podcast in the show notes. So all of
Oh,
the
cool. Thank you.
resources for how to access both Andrea or how to access myself, those links will all be in the show notes. So thank you very much for this very well spent time.
And thanks for opening the door for other people to listen. That's exciting, huh? Really. Getting people to tune into themselves this way is magical.
Yes, it is.